Hi, I'm Jett. I'm the WVU Extension Commercial Horticulture Specialist, and we are at the Horticulture Organic Farm. It is early March, and we're about to harvest some of our winter-grown crops that we've grown in this high tunnel structure that were planted in mid to late fall of the previous year. So what we're looking at here today is how we can grow crops year-round in West Virginia. And everything we're going to be looking at today are cool season crops, so they really grew very well over the winter months. And we established these crops after we finished our last summer crop in this high tunnel structure. So a high tunnel is a solar-powered greenhouse that uses natural solar energy to warm it. And then you also are using the sides that are allowed to be opened up to ventilate it by natural air currents. The crops that we have growing in the structure are grown in the native soil on this particular farm. So we're using all natural resources: air, sun, soil. We actually even collect the rainwater off of the structure and recirculate that back into our irrigation system. This is all solar powered. The vents on this structure are powered by solar energy. So we're looking at a completely renewable, sustaining production system for food that we can grow here in West Virginia year-round. So we're going to look at these individual crops, how they look when they're about ready to be harvested, which is the growth stage that we're at now. And then we're going to harvest them, and then we're going to show how they're packaged or handled and washed prior to market. So we are about to harvest 18 different cool season crops in this high tunnel that were planted in mid to late fall the previous year. This is an excellent way to grow a lot of food on a small amount of space. This particular tunnel is 30 feet wide by 72 feet long, and you can see that we're running the rows sort of longitudinally or crossways, so we're maximizing our area that we're using for food crop production. We have 18 crops being grown in here, of which are 4 types of lettuces. We have an iceberg lettuce, which is commonly purchased in most grocery stores and is imported into West Virginia from the West Coast. But you're able to grow iceberg lettuce here in West Virginia year-round using a high tunnel. And we also have some leaf lettuces, or what is called easy cut lettuce, where you just cut it as a loose leaf crop, and then it's mixed with other types of greens in a salad greens mixture. We have spinach, which is a common cool season crop, very winter hardy, very productive. We're growing traditional root crops such as turnips, salad turnips, radishes, and 2 different types of carrots, a purple carrot and an orange carrot. We're also growing leafy greens such as collard greens. So collard greens have a history in southern Appalachia, but have not been as popular in central and northern Appalachia. And we're also comparing the collard greens to kale. We have 2 different types of kale, a winter boar kale, which is a green kale, and we have a red boar kale, which is a red leaf kale. So those are also combined with some of our broccoli we're growing here. We're growing what's called a winter sprouting broccoli. So winter sprouting broccoli produces these loose florets of purple, mostly purple florets, and you just clip the florets or snap them and harvest them as loose florets throughout the growing season. So these are the crops we're growing. We also are growing a cover crop. So there are winter cover crops that are grown that are used to build the soil health and build the soil quality. So we have some of the plots where the winter cover crop, which is an annual ryegrass mixed with a winter pea, an Austrian winter pea, and crimson clover, and another type of clover. So those are mixed so that when we are ready to plant our next crop in April, we just essentially chop that up and till it into the soil. Those are the crops that we're growing in the high tunnel this winter, and we've been harvesting them on a square foot basis. So we will have data for you when we're finished harvesting on yield per square foot and how these crops rank in yield per square foot and how much labor is involved in planting them and harvesting them and even prepping them for market. So we have done a lot of lettuce trials in high tunnels over the past 5 years. We've looked at over 120 different types of lettuces, or over 100 different varieties of lettuces, mostly head lettuces. And some of our best head lettuces we are growing in this high tunnel this winter because we've already screened out the best varieties. This is a variety called Green Forest, which is one of our most productive green romaine varieties that we can grow in a high tunnel in West Virginia. So again, this is a plant that was planted as a plug, which was 3 to 4 weeks old in mid-October of the previous year. So it's been growing for now 120 days. It's been a solid 4-month growing season or more for this to reach this size. So this is marketable maturity for romaine lettuce. It's 8 to 10 inches wide in diameter, and you can see it's nice and green. The leaves haven't become discolored, or the center hasn't become a little bit slimy. That's an indication if it's over mature, if you see those indicators. But all these lettuces here are ready to be harvested for a farm to school market, a winter farmers market, a CSA, subscription type farm, or selling them to a hospital as a sales to another institution. So these are going to go to either a hospital or a school locally. So we're going to harvest it now. And so when we harvest head lettuce, there's 2 ways to do it. I mean, in a high tunnel where we don't have large number of plants, I just essentially uproot the plant, and then I trim off the root ball right at the ground level, and then I take off some of the older leaves on the side. So I look at the lettuce to make sure there are no aphids on it. It looks clean. As you can see, it is a clean head of lettuce because it hasn't had any rain on it. We're not getting rain splash soil on it, so it's a very clean product. You could take this to market as is without washing it. But if your customer wants washed lettuce, we'll demonstrate how to do that. But the shelf life on lettuce and all these other crops as well is much longer if it's not washed when you market it. So washing is optional, but it can be done with some of these leafy greens. So this will weigh about a half a pound to 3/4 of a pound. And this is a perfect size for marketing. One of the most popular winter leafy greens that we can grow in a high tunnel in West Virginia are collard greens. Collard greens are very nutrient dense, incredibly flavorful leafy greens that I don't feel have been given enough attention as an alternative to kale or even spinach. So we have a crop of this particular variety is Georgia green, collard green. We're also growing a Bates type collard green called Champion. The Georgia variety that you see here has a little bit of a larger leaf, and actually what we found is a better collard green to grow in the summer. The Champion variety that we also have is a better winter variety, but we also have some very good leaves on this. So when we harvest collard greens, we're essentially just snapping the leaves off of them. This is perfect size leaf. We're just taking leaves off, de-leafing it. We may be taking 10 leaves off or more. And I try to leave about 3 leaves on the top, so the plant will come back and keep sizing up these leaves, and will grow even more leaves. So you just every week, in the wintertime we're harvesting once per week on the collard greens. We're taking about 5 to 6 leaves off of each plant, and then we're going to be bunching them up with a rubber band, like what we have here. And then when they're marketed, they're usually sold as about 10 to 12 leaves in a bunch. And they can be washed, or they can just be taken to market as an unwashed leafy green. One of the most valuable tools that you can have for high tunnel production is a soil thermometer. So we use this soil thermometer to schedule when we're ready to plant crops. So, here we are in early March in a high tunnel, and our soil temperatures are already 60 degrees. So these crops are vigorously growing, but it's also going to be useful for next month when we start our next crop of cucumbers in this high tunnel, because we can't plant cucumbers unless the soil temperature is above 60 degrees. So we're going to use our soil thermometer at the 2 to 3 inch depth to make sure that the soil temperature is warm enough. So this is a crop or a plot that we previously had in radishes that we grew in this high tunnel all winter. Radishes were productive, producing 12 to 15 per square foot that were marketable. But at this time of the year, we're finished with harvesting them. We took the whole crop out and then we re-tilled it, just lightly tilled it with a little hand tool that I have here. And then we're going to move into seeding leaf lettuce, a really quick crop of leaf lettuce. So this is an example of succession planting. You finish one crop, you immediately take that crop out, you establish another crop right behind it. That is succession planting. It works very well with a lot of different crops in high tunnels, but we're using it with radishes, and then we're following it with a leaf lettuce. So as the crops start waking up and growing a lot here in early spring, we also see some pests that start to emerge. So one of the most common pests that we have on these cool season high tunnel crops is aphids. So there are many species of aphids that attack the leafy greens and even some of these other root crops, the tops on some of the root crops. So to monitor for aphid infestation or aphid movement within the high tunnel, we put these individual yellow sticky card traps randomly throughout the structure, and we monitor those daily to see if there's any aphids that become attached to these cards. So when we detect aphids, we start an organic spray or a very soft insecticide spray so that we're able to control them before they get out of control. Many of these crops are unmarketable if they have any insect contamination. So it's very important to keep the insects under control. Scout the crop regularly, walk the rows regularly, use sticky cards as traps, but also it's important not to keep the high tunnel too hot, keep the temperature on the cool side. For most of these cool season crops, they like a daytime temperature of 65 to 72 degrees. This structure is powered by solar panels that charge a battery that control a thermostat that raises and lowers the vents to keep the temperature in this structure between 65 and 72 degrees. So if you don't have this type of accessory on your high tunnel, you will need to open and close the sides just manually on sunny days like what we're seeing here to keep the temperature from getting too hot in here, which could cause an outbreak of pests such as aphids. So one of the options that you have as a winter crops high tunnel producer is to wash your produce before taking it to market. Again, washing produce is optional, depending on whether your end user or buyer is requesting the produce to be washed. Many times, certain schools prefer to get produce unwashed to the cafeteria and they do the washing themselves. But if you do come into a situation where you do have to do your own washing, it's a very simple process. Like I said, you're coming into a crop that is very clean, just naturally clean. You don't see any soil on it. And then you've hopefully had the insects under control, so there should not be any insects on the leaves. But washing can be done in a formal wash station where you use stainless steel basins where you can do more volume. But one quick way to wash is just set up several buckets of water that's potable water, and then we chlorinate the water that's in the first wash. We put a tablespoon per 5 gallons of water, which gives us about 125 parts per million of chlorine. So we're using a 5% chlorine solution, and so that is the first wash that we do. Again, when we harvest it, you want to trim off some of these lower leaves. Maybe they're a little discolored and they're hanging down. So you have a head of lettuce here. You can essentially immerse it in water, around, and then let it drip dry on a slatted container like this that will allow the water to drain through it. If you're doing more leafy greens, you can wash them in bags, and then you will use to spin dry them to get the water off the leaves. But root crops, for example, the turnips that we harvested earlier, they're fairly clean when they were harvested, but if we want to make them a little bit cleaner and maybe sanitize them, we can essentially just put them into the chlorinated water, wash off some of that soil that is on the roots. And then on the turnips and the radishes, we don't trim any of the longer roots on it. We just leave the roots on it. They're left to be unbunched like this, and then again put on a slatted table or a slatted container to drip dry. So kale is commonly washed as well, so you may want to wash loose leaf kale. So again, immersing it in the chlorinated water and just kind of making sure you're washing off anything that may be attached to the leaves and letting that sort of drip, and then again putting them into a container that can be drained. So those are examples of very quick washing that can be done. But again, you're going to have a longer shelf life if you don't wash produce. So you may want to just harvested as a crop, quickly cut in the high tunnel, bunched, and then put into a cooler before you take it to harvest or take it to market. Or specifically, if your customer wants it to be washed, you can wash it directly on the farm.